the system itself is breaking, and buildings are getting older. And as buildings are getting older, the needs for repair are greater, and it's hard to keep up properties that don't have adequate cash flow. And our intention is to provide dignified housing, humane housing. And it kind of puts us into a conundrum, like I said, where we're scrambling, and we do scramble to fundraise, to receive additional funding from government sources, to fundraise with private funders. And we're recognizing that it's not sustainable.
We're rolling. We're rolling.
This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.
We reappointed the city attorney. The council reappointed the COO, Margaret Anderson Kelleher, and then did not reappoint Todd Barnett as Office of Community Safety Commissioner. Yeah, then the mayor said he was going to veto it, and vetoing a not action, I think, gives him a little bit of wiggle room, but it doesn't change the outcome because the council has to affirmatively approve confirmation.
Got it. What were the arguments? How did the debate go?
For Todd in particular, from me, is that there were two things. One is that the AFSCME workers, so the AFSCME workers at the city, they sent out a survey to their members and then gave us the results. Basically, what is it like working with this person? How good a job have they done? And they asked specific questions that I'm not remembering from off the top of my head, but his were mixed results. And one in particular was that he was not affirmatively creating a safe and inclusive work environment. So that was concerning. And then another is that last year, MPD went $20 million over budget, and he himself did not know about it until the end of the year. And that's concerning. We're having major budget implications this year across the entire city, and he didn't know about it until the end of the year after it had all already happened.
He's the highest paid employee in the city, basically the highest ranking under the mayor.
He makes over $300,000.
This is the Wedge Live podcast. I'm your host, John Edwards. I'm joined by Councilmember Soren Stevenson of the Minneapolis City Council. Thank you for being here. And AsaleSol, who is the Executive Director at Housing in Action, affordable housing nonprofit. We're here to talk about housing. Last month, in March, the City Council passed a 30-day eviction notice extension, and it kicked off a conversation. One of the key points of conversation during that debate was affordable housing nonprofits are in rough shape financially, and the argument was you can't saddle them with the 30-day notice extension because it would just tip them over the brink effectively. And I thought a starting point for today's conversation, AsaleSol Young, would be like, why is that? Right? Everyone seemed to agree that was the case. Why is that?
Absolutely. So this is my first time on your podcast. I just want to say hi to your audience. My name is AsaleSol. I use they, them pronouns. And as John pointed out, I'm the Executive Director of Housing in Action. We are a 31-year-old affordable housing nonprofit providing affordable homes for low-income rental, as well as developing homes for affordable sale to low-income buyers. We also do advocacy work and really believe in connecting our lower income neighbors and community members with our elected officials. So some of you may be familiar with our policy forums that we do a couple of times a year. And I'm really grateful. John, thank you for having us, and Councilmember Soren, thank you for being here as well. So to answer your question, I think we have to recognize that one, affordable housing providers are providing a material resource at market rate. I think that's something that a lot of people don't understand, is that we don't get any kind of reduction when we develop homes, when we renovate, when we turn units. We have to pay the same rate as the market is asking for. But the income stream that we're expected to rely on is at a reduced rate. It's at an affordable rate. So we don't have sort of the dynamic of a market to market cash flow structure. And so oftentimes nonprofits are expected to fill those gaps in cash flow with additional fundraising, sometimes from operational reserves. And that over decades creates a really unbearable situation. We have to recognize that a lot of the affordable housing operators in the Twin Cities, but also specifically Minneapolis, are over 50 years old. And I think the real question is around, is the system operating the way that it should? We know that market rate housing is also failing, right? We know that whether you're a middle income worker, the ability to afford homes for sale is declining, as well as people are finding that even keeping up with their rents is difficult. And we're talking about folks that, again, are middle income, let alone low income families. And so I think it's just really important to recognize things like that. I think a lot of folks don't understand how that machine kind of works. And so if within capitalism, the mainstream market is starting to fail, which we all see that's happening in housing on a national level, additionally, within affordable housing, you have a system that's starting to break as well within a broken capitalist mainstream system. And all of that weight kind of falls onto housing nonprofits that are asked to fill in the gaps that government hasn't figured out how to sustainably fill. And I think that's what brings us to the conversation today, is recognizing that, affordable housing nonprofits, we are the folks that are having conversations with families outside of a crisis, like in addition to a crisis, when they have personal crises, to help them figure out how to sustain their housing and how to be stable. We're not folks that are interested in turning people out onto the street. That's just not why we exist. We exist for the complete opposite reality. I think the reason why so many housing nonprofits came out to say, please don't do this, is because this compounds over time. And at some point, we will break. And we need government to step up and support.
Is there some series of factors specifically that have happened, in this year or the last couple of years that are causing this to be a tougher time than normal?
I don't know that there's anything new other than what I'm naming as compounding. The system itself is breaking, and buildings are getting older. And as buildings are getting older, the needs for repair are greater, and it's hard to keep up properties that don't have adequate cash flow. And our intention is to provide dignified housing, humane housing. And it kind of puts us into a conundrum, like I said, where we're scrambling, and we do scramble to fundraise, to receive additional funding from government sources, to fundraise with private funders. And we're recognizing that it's not sustainable. It's becoming incredibly difficult to provide that dignity that we exist to provide for the families that we exist to provide them for, which is low-income families.
So, Soren, you acknowledged all these things in conversations at the city council, and yet you still supported the 30-day notice extension on evictions. Can you talk about how you came to that decision and what we can do about this?
I think that our neighbors needed more time. I still think that our neighbors need more time to come up with the rent. Everybody knows that so many people were trapped in their homes, hiding from the federal government. And so a lot of people, low income, middle income people, have been not working and falling behind on their rent. So that's the need. That's why I thought we needed this. That's why I still think that we need this. But I'm not blind. I can acknowledge and see that our nonprofit affordable housing groups are really struggling. I think COVID played a lot into this, particularly on the rental side. With the eviction moratorium was very difficult for them. They didn't get the same financial relief that others did get. So I think there's many of the affordable housing groups, their leadership is the same that went through COVID. And so they've spent the last 5 years trying to hang on and recover from COVID. And so this isn't just, but this is partly dealing with the hangover of COVID.
I just think that you raise a really good point about COVID. And that is, for me, it's that, housing providers like Housing in Action had to adapt very quickly to something that nobody expected, right? Nobody anticipated COVID. Obviously, we didn't anticipate the murder of George Floyd, so therefore we couldn't anticipate the uprising and all of those impacts. And, I can speak to what Housing in Action did during that time, which was we paused our regular daily tasks to ensure that all of our residents felt safe and stable within their homes, make sure they were fed because a lot of our housing operates in food deserts. And so the added strain of not being able to travel, right? And so making sure, we were literally providing food. We partnered with other organizations to do food giveaways and food deliveries. And so this is the work that a lot of affordable housing operators do, is try to fill in those gaps and meet the need. And I think that, again, my argument is that we did a lot of learning. We as in nonprofits, and I think as individuals of this city, we did a lot of learning from 2020. And a lot of the mutual aid that was so successful during the Metro Surge really came out of the mutual aid that was developed in 2020. And I think that what we didn't see in 2020, which we still haven't seen today, is the government, our city government, actually stepping up to say, we're not going to overburden individual people. We're not going to overburden small landlords, which are also Black and brown folks, which are also immigrants. We're not going to overburden nonprofits. We're actually going to align our city budget in a way that reflects city priority to keep people safe, and in a way that reflects that we recognize the sacrifices that have been made by these operators. And we're not going to keep asking them to make that financial sacrifice. I think one of the things that was missing from the conversation is that we assume that immigrants are only renters. There's never been a conversation about, are we willing to support people in paying their mortgages on time? Banks are incredibly difficult to negotiate with in those situations, unlike an affordable housing provider who is willing to sit down with people when they're struggling to pay their rent. We didn't honor the fact that immigrants also own housing in this city and are also small landlords, just like Black and brown folks in my community in North Minneapolis, in communities like Phillips in South Minneapolis. So I think that we need to have a deeper conversation that does recognize the fact that we're not asking the government to operate alone. We're simply asking the government to use its massive $2 billion budget to recognize this is a problem. It's ongoing. COVID only highlighted, y'all. It only highlighted the systemic issues. It didn't, people say it exacerbated them, but I really feel like it really just brought them to the surface and made them undeniable. And they've continued. And we're still waiting for a city budget that reflects that kind of understanding.
Soren, can you respond to that? Like the idea that, you're focused maybe more on the renter side of the problem and not maybe the entirety of it.
I can acknowledge a ton of shortcomings in the city's budget. I mean, there are many. I think that yes, it would have been nice if we would have been able, or maybe had been pushed more to do to help homeowners who were affected as well. The reason that we went for rental is because the county has a very well seasoned program that we could just put money into, and it goes out very quickly. And so this was a very quick way for us to respond, as opposed to having to create a new program, which the city infrastructure, like the human infrastructure, people were very much like, oh, we can't create a new program. It'll take 6 months at a minimum, and then we'll get the money out, and then people will have already lost their homes. So there was a lot of that going on. But what I really want to get at is that our housing system doesn't have to be so fragile that anytime there's a disruption, we automatically have a housing crisis. We don't have to have a housing system that is based exclusively on, is somebody making money? And if they're not making money, then people have to be homeless. This is insane when you break it down to its bare minimum of talking about what needs to happen. Rental assistance is just like it's profit shoring for landlords. Why do landlords have to make profit in order for people to have a place to sleep at night? So we have a lot of change we need to do in this country and in this city on how we deal with housing. Minneapolis City Council is not going to be able to change every problem. The federal government has a huge responsibility here. They've, in a lot of ways, created a lot of these problems. But what I want to get at is, what can we do to make our housing system more resilient so that every time there's a problem, like a greater societal problem, it doesn't immediately trigger fears of evictions, of homelessness, of foreclosures. Because we're in a bad spot right now.
We are in a bad spot, and I agree that the housing system is incredibly fragile. Again, as I pointed out earlier, it's fragile for everyone, not just the affordable housing market. It's also fragile for the mainstream market, for the market rate industry. And so I do want to push back on this notion that rental subsidy is about profit. A lot of small landlords, community-based landlords, I'm talking about our neighbors. Again, as I said, there are small landlords who own duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, who are Black, who are brown, who are immigrant. There are landlords who are nonprofits, like Housing in Action. It's not just, I think oftentimes we have this idea that landlords are only corporate monsters. And so let's be nuanced in our language, please. Subsidy means that the cost of the unit outweighs what the landlord is asking for. It far outpaces what the landlord is asking for. And so a subsidy is the government's opportunity to say, thank you, small landlord, affordable housing landlord, for providing something that we as the government are not providing. You're doing us a favor. You're taking this problem off of our shoulders, which is why nonprofits exist. And we're going to provide a cushion so that you can keep the water running in those units. Like, we have to talk about this in a very realistic, in a real, tangible way, not just in this airy pie in the sky way. Corporate landlords they have the resources to cover gaps if folks stop paying rent. The reality is that small landlords do not. The reality is that affordable housing landlords do not, because we're already taking rent that is significantly lower than the cost of managing property. Again, let's talk about the reality. We're doing things, we're operating at market rate because we don't get a discount to operate. But our income it's reduced so that people whose jobs are not paying them a living wage can afford to live there. And so to me, this is not about positioning affordable housing providers and small landlords, small community-based landlords in particular, against folks like you, Councilmember Soren. Because I think values-wise, we agree on a lot of things. But I think that the challenge is not getting lazy in the conversation. It's really easy to paint this sort of false dichotomy of renters versus all landlords and just kind of clump landlords together and clump renters together. But part of my intention is to draw us to the fact that this is about protecting people who want to be a part of their community. This is about sustaining housing both today and tomorrow. And not just saying, oh, there's a crisis that we don't know how to work with, And so we're going to overburden everyone else. And when the city doesn't say we're willing to take from other aspects of our budget to help to significantly impact people's capacity for stability in their housing, then all the city is doing is deferring and sort of negating responsibility. It's saying like, oh, we're putting this on the affordable housing landlords. We're putting this on the small community-based landlords who we're not willing to see. And I hear what you're saying about not having the capacity to create additional programming. But again, it does feel like that's for the government to figure out. That's kind of like why we elected you all, why we pay your salaries. And instead it's like, oh, we don't have capacity to figure this out, so we'll just pass the bucket, pass the blame onto small landlords and affordable housing landlords. And I do want to continue to make that distinction. I am not talking about corporate landlords. I am not talking about out-of-state investors. I'm talking about people who are a part of community who have shown up consistently for mutual aid from 2020 to today. Our systems are incredibly effective because of people that work in nonprofits, because of small landlords who are a part of their community, who live in the buildings, their duplexes and triplexes that they're providing at an affordable rate to renters.
Councilmember Stevenson, do you think there's an element of this is a big problem, the city has a limited number of tools to solve it, and so you kind of get fixated on one type of tool, like regulating or putting burdens on landlords, and then we're powerless to do anything else because we're just the city. Like, we can't fix this. This is a problem that other levels of government are falling short on. Like, do you think that's a dynamic at play here?
Yeah, I definitely think that's a dynamic at play here. I totally hear you on our government, our city government, our county, our state, our federal government have not stepped up to do what they need to do. I think we all agree that housing is a human right, and at no level of government have we done what's necessary in order to make that an actual right. So I wanted to call that out. I do think, if you're asking me, John, if you're asking me about why we decided to go with rental assistance as opposed to doing mortgage assistance, I do think there was a certain pushback from within the administration that was like, that's not something that we can do right now, and we're not happy that you're spending money on anything, so definitely don't spend money on something that we think would be difficult to spend money on. So I think a lot of the shortcomings, of which there are many that the city has done in the last couple of months, I think one of them is that there is this pushback towards our budget's not right, it's not going well, don't spend money on anything. And if you're going to spend money, it better be easy for us to spend money. And so I do think that some of the shortcomings coming from the city have been stemming from that. And I totally agree that our city budget needs to be more responsive to the needs of the community. And at the same time, we need the state to step in, and we need the federal government to step in, because a lot of these issues are something that the city can have a major effect on, but that the city cannot do on its own. So I won't sit here and say like, oh yeah, no, city's off the hook because all these other governments need to do stuff. No, the city has a lot of things that it can and should be doing, and we can't do it alone.
What should we be pushing for? Do we have a state legislative agenda? What policies do we need to be looking for at the city level, the state level? What do we want to see happen?
I think there's a couple of things that we need to do. Something that I think is really important is we need to break out of the current subsidy structures, because what we have right now, the major form of creating affordable housing in the country is called LIHTC, which is low-income housing tax credits, and it's where the government's or tax credits are sold to investors, and then that money is used to build affordable housing. And it's very hard to get approval for these. And then there's all kinds of stipulations that go with them. And there's places that you can build and places where you'll get extra money if you build it here. And it's a very difficult program to do. And it ends up, AsaleSol, you were talking about affordable housing developers are at market rate. They're just not getting a market return. A lot of times affordable housing developers are actually much more expensive than market rate. And then they're not getting even a market return. And so it's like playing a game with like a 1.5 handicap or something like that. And so our affordable housing nonprofits have been asked to do something impossible. And so we have created a fragile system by doing that. So something that I really think is important is that we need to start breaking out of this model of doing affordable housing this way. I think in a certain way, democracy in housing is just as important as political democracy, economic democracy. So one small way that we could really improve is by getting people in control of their own homes, whether it's through cooperatives or home ownership is a great way, obviously. But when it comes to multifamily buildings, if you can have residents be the ones who are in control, residents are deciding what their rent is, residents are deciding what maintenance is being done, and then they're balancing that for themselves, then you have not only just affordable housing that people can actually choose to afford, but it's dignified housing because people get the chance to say, okay, yes, we need the new roof and we'll pay for how much it costs. Or no, we're not going to put in all new railing because we don't want to pay the additional amount. And by giving people control, you're giving our neighbors dignity in the types of homes that they have, as well as being outside of this broken, really federal system of affordable housing. So that's one policy I'd like to see. We can do that at the city level, and it only gets easier when you do it at the state level.
Yeah, and I 100% agree with the broken practice that we're operating in today. I think that mixed housing, like a diverse option of housing, is really important. We are co-developing a cooperative project with Black Lives of Unitarian Universalism. We really believe in that as ownership. And I just want to point out, like, it's not cooperative or ownership. You can have cooperatives that are limited equity ownership opportunities. And so I think that that's really important. So yes to home is one concrete policy that affects the capacity for us to do this work and to do it at a meaningful rate. It specifically addresses zoning and allows different kinds of housing to be erected across Minneapolis. And it doesn't just pertain to Minneapolis, but we're talking specifically about Minneapolis. And so it allows for townhouse development. It allows for multi-units on what we consider a single family plot of land, which frankly is an archaic structure at this point. Single family homes are an option, but they're certainly not the only option. And as you have a growing city and as you have these sort of economic disparities, to Soren's point, we need to have greater diversity, being able to build more cooperatives. The city recently put out an RFP for cluster home development, which is amazing. That's an amazing opportunity for folks to take these city-owned lots, which I think there are too many of, frankly, that are vacant, but to take city-owned lots and develop multiple units on a single lot around a central piece. So it's somewhere between like a townhome development and a cooperative, because there's shared land for the homes on that plot, but folks still get their own individual spaces or their individual family spaces. And so things like that we need to do way more of that. That will bring down the cost of development as well as the cost of ownership and rental. There's a couple of big pieces that I want to push, including our Future Starts with Home, which is a legislative amendment push to ensure that no matter who's in office, no matter who the governor is, what party the governor belongs to, or how the House and Senate are panning out, that housing gets a significant amount of resources from our state budget. That's huge. Housing, like you said, Soren, like we all believe in housing as a human right. And it's something that we don't give enough attention to in this state. And so this would ensure that we can't get out of that we have to recognize that people need places to stay and they need them to be affordable and dignified. And then the last piece that I'll promote is Bring It Home, which allows for greater access to subsidy for renters. And right now it's an effective tool. I think I'm open to other tools. Soren, I think that you were kind of like, I don't love that tool, but right now it's one of the better tools for renters to access housing wherever they want to, whatever communities they want to live in, and to be able to do that at rates that they can afford. So Bring It Home Minnesota, Yes to Home Minnesota, and Our Future Starts with Home are all legislative agendas and policies that folks should investigate and support.
Yeah, you can Google those and find information. These are all things happening in the state legislature that people can support. Hey, let's talk about the new cop city, the debate we're having about that, and like our allocation of resources here. Soren, is this actually a question of choices? Like if we invest in that, we can't invest in other things. I've heard a little bit of an argument from the Frye administration that like, no, this is a capital project. This isn't money we could actually spend on housing, for example, and rental subsidies, things like that. It's like, to what degree is this like a choice of how we allocate our resources, whether or not to build this police and public safety training facility versus spending our money in other ways?
So just to start off is that a little more than half of the initial money that they wanted, they were saying cut traffic calming and ADA sidewalk improvements and fund the training and wellness center instead. And so this is getting exactly at what you were saying, AsaleSol, of having a budget that actually reflects the needs of the community. We know in our city that people die crossing the street, in traffic, all kinds of stuff. And so we're asking ourselves, are we putting forward a budget that is going to keep our neighbors alive, keep our neighbors safe, or are we putting forward a budget that's going to continue to do other things? So it really is a matter of prioritization. Yes, this money is going to be borrowed for capital. I mean, the majority of the money would be borrowed for capital improvements, but we get to choose what we borrow on. And so we can choose to borrow to build a very expensive training and wellness center, or we can choose to borrow to build housing. Yes, we can't use this money to operate the housing, but we could build it. We could choose to improve our streets, improve our sidewalks. That's literally what we have chosen. And they were asking us to choose something else, to choose the training and wellness center instead. So this really was, where is your dollar needed more? And they were trying to make a little confusion about what the money could be used on. But when you look at where the money was coming from, it was a clear choice of, are we investing in community or are we investing elsewhere? And so that's why I came out so strong against it and was really putting in front of people, there is so much else we can do. AsaleSol, you were talking about vacant lots that the city owns. There are so many of those. What if we built on those and we had incubator space for small businesses on the bottom and then homes on top of it? You know, let's build that. We can borrow money to build that. But instead, we're being asked to borrow money to build something else that is a fine thing. You know, training, we need wellness. Those are fine things. But when I'm thinking about what our number one priority is, that's not my number one priority.
Yeah, I really appreciate that reflection. I think one of the things that felt just a little off to me was even the question of Cop City when we're in the middle of this crisis. And particularly, I think back to 2020, when, you know, the citizens, you know, we made a clear ask, which was not to invest more in our police system and to put money into other resources. And so just even the question being raised felt a little odd. And so I think I'd like to understand that better, of just like how we go from the directive of the voters, which is to defund, not to eradicate, but to defund. So spending less of our budget on the police and more on community centered resources, like how we get here where we are today, where, you all delayed the vote, but we know it's just a delay, so it will come back. And again, I just want to understand how we're here.
Yeah, we're here because elections have consequences, and we reelected a mayor who wants to invest in the police first and foremost. And so that's how it happened. So we're living in the reality of how elections go. And believe me, I understand when it comes to how much money was spent in the race and all this sort of stuff. But I personally think that the mayor and some of my colleagues who I disagree with on this issue, they were elected for the purpose of spending more money on the police. And they see that very clearly. I don't see my job as that. So I'm only saying this to say this is how we got here. And what we need to do to get out of here is a lot of things. But what I'm trying to do is make the case to my colleagues and make the case to the city that we can spend our money somewhere else that's going to have these community benefits. Because when we're talking about public safety in the city, people are so often talking about homelessness. And man, we could just have such improvements in public safety if we allowed people places to live. And so that's where I want to spend my money.
That is the conversation, because we had all this talk about Uptown, public safety in Uptown, which is near where I live. And I look at the crime stats when these topics come up, and I see how it's covered in the local news, like Uptown crime, this is violence. It's people are being terrorized out there. I look at the crime stats and we're at a low point. We're like at pre-2020 levels of violent crime. It literally is just the site of homelessness, and people are upset about needles and seeing human misery everywhere. And that's not really a police question at all.
Yeah, we know too that the cost of a large houseless community far outweighs the cost of actually housing people. And so, when we think about the overall cost of Cop City, 38 million, do I have that number accurate? Like 38 million is the sort of end bill of that. We can house folks for less, and we can actually create a feeling of safety for people, both the houseless as well as those who are currently housed. And I really appreciate that point, John, of like people's challenge is that they're seeing poverty. They're seeing the impact of a system, a capitalist system that is not working, that is absolutely breaking. It was never intended to support all of us living stable, healthy lives. That's not the intention of our capitalist system, and we're all starting to get to a point where we cannot deny that. But part of why I wanted to have this conversation is to bring us all back to the fact that we can create solutions together, and that's really that has to be the focus of our work. It has to be the focus, and I don't just mean our work as a nonprofit. I mean the work of caring citizens, the work of caring neighbors. We have done, again, I'll continue to tout the effectiveness of mutual aid across neighborhoods that has consistently felt safer to a lot of folks, consistently made people feel like they're included in a community that we could easily feel like we're not included in. And I do point to myself as a Black body in that. And we really have to ask ourselves, what is it we need from our government? And what is it we need to demand from our government to replicate that kind of care for each other? It's not that we further criminalize something that people are not in control of. And I know you agree with me, Soren. I'm just sort of reiterating what you're saying.
Councilmember Stevenson, I'm very afraid right now during the Trump administration for a whole lot of reasons, but people are going to have their health care cut to a significant degree, like unprecedented degree of health care cuts are coming in terms of Medicaid. People have already had their subsidies cut for health insurance is more expensive for everyone. Food assistance cut. Like the degree of having the rug pulled out from us is, I don't know if we're ready for it. Council member, like what can you do? Are you as afraid and helpless as I am, as I feel, or what do we do?
I'm certainly afraid. I don't know how helpless you feel, but I'm certainly afraid. This is what I'm trying to get at with the housing system. The same goes for our food. The same goes for our healthcare, is that we have made these brittle systems where we are entirely reliant on outside things outside of our control. And so when we're talking about food, that's a whole nother issue. I have not thought as much about how we feed everyone in Minneapolis as I've thought about how much we house everyone in Minneapolis, just to be fully transparent. But when we're relying on, we just understand that a large percentage, like I'm going to throw out a random number, not random, but a number, like 15% of Minneapolitans, could be more, do not have enough money for food every single month. We just say that's normal. It's normal that so many Minneapolitans, without any sort of help, would not have enough food. That's insane. And that's what we're dealing with under AsaleSol. You were talking about, this is what capitalism has wrought. This is what we're looking at when we're looking at food has to make a profit, housing has to make a profit, transportation has to make a profit. And we're looking at all these different things, and we're not saying, what do humans need in order to live? They need food, they need homes, they need something dignified to do with their time. We need to be thinking a lot more about how we can create resilience here in Minneapolis as we have a changing climate, as we have a federal government that will alternatively help and then hurt and then help and then hurt. And, I'm concerned about our democracy, so maybe we'll just be in a place of hurt for a while. But we need resilience within the city. I think Minneapolis is unique in that we have these bonds of mutual aid that we've built through the uprising and now through the federal invasion. But we're going to have to take those to the next level. Maybe not in terms of like hours on the street, but in terms of what are we going to do to actually, on an ongoing basis, look out for our neighbors and create systems within our city that are going to meet our needs.
Income tax, local income tax.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. AsaleSol, are you also as afraid and helpless feeling as I am constantly?
I agree with Soren that I'm nervous, but I don't yet feel helpless because I recognize that we haven't used all of our tools, that we're still trying to understand, to your point, Soren, like how we kind of manipulate the tools of the system. I'm also, an Audre Lorde follower, right? So the idea that we can't use the master's tools to tear down the master's house, but ultimately capitalism is breaking, and we're recognizing that, to Soren's point, we have a federal government right now that is actively operating against its people, against the residents of this country. And so it's time that we work together to build creative solutions that protect all of us and see all of us in that. And so I think the question of medical support is obviously not something that I can speak on, of how we kind of even create mutual aid networks that are effectively covering that gap of medicine, of medical care. That's a massive gap, in addition to the gaps around food. And we know that food wellness is health, right? Health ultimately starts with food wellness. And so I think we start thinking about, when we think about zoning in our city, that's one thing we can build into our zoning practices. Are we saying to developers that you have to have green space? You have to build, no matter how many units you put on a plot, there has to be space for community garden, for the residents of that space to be able to develop a garden if they choose to do so. Those are things that start to systematize our understanding of what we stand to lose, and that we're like I said, putting a budget together that reflects the need that is both present today and that we see coming tomorrow.
Councilmember Stevenson, one of the issues when you were elected in the campaign, for me at least, and a lot of people, was the next comprehensive plan, which is a big overarching policies related to housing and planning and the future growth of the city. So a question for both of you, Soren first, throw out some, maybe this is a short answer question so we can finish up here, but what are some policies that we want to see in the next comprehensive plan as we start thinking about that over the next couple of years?
Yeah, I have been thinking about this for many, many years, so I'm really excited to dig into it. But one thing that I ran on was making triplexes real. The rules that we have in our zoning law make it so that you can build a triplex, but there's every rule around it to make it very difficult for you to do that. So I think we should also go up to quadplexes. I live in a quadplex. It's a beautiful, beautiful place, and it makes the neighborhood really lovely. So, we should upzone a little bit. We should change the rules. There's all kinds of nitty gritty stuff like floor area ratios and setbacks and all kinds of, and height requirements and everything like that boxes in the building to give us the status quo. And so there's all kinds of those rules that we need to dig into. There's more work that we need to do on missing middle. There's more work. John, I've heard you bemoan that the Wedge got downzoned in a lot of places. And so our really transit rich areas, we need to be please build as many homes as you want in our transit rich areas. You got BRT, you got trains here. Please, for the love of God, just build some homes here. I want our neighborhoods to be more interesting. So I want people to be able to say okay, I am going to put a little addition on the front of my house and run a coffee shop out of it, or an art gallery, or a farm stand, or, whatever it is, allowing people to actually do that in our neighborhoods to make our neighborhoods more interesting, giving people more chance to do things that they want to do and that would make their lives better and make our lives better, not having our zoning code be getting in the way of that. So that's, I think, just a high level things that I'm interested in.
So I hope one day our politics normalize enough so that we can get to arguing over how much Soren Stevenson wants to ruin Minneapolis with all his crazy radical ideas. I would love if we could start that kind of politics again, because I'm exhausted. So your idea is AsaleSol.
Part of my interest, again, is just understanding how we can work closer together, city government and affordable housing nonprofits, how we can work with our communities to really demand that the budget align in the ways that we need them to. And so I would actually sort of yield to you to say, are there things that maybe you all, or you specifically, would like to see more from us as nonprofits, as organizers, things that, we can be doing better or more of to really put the pressure on the city government to better align budgetarily?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one thing I would say is be organized, have your ducks in a row, have your people in a row, and say, be able to bring, when you're this is what we want to throw down for, to be able to really throw down, and it be not just AsaleSol or not just housing in action, but B, here's AsaleSol, here's housing in action, and here's 75 people who also agree. Like be organized. That is critical. And then secondly, I would say when we're talking about the budget, we're talking about everything. And so we have to understand that when the training and wellness center comes up, that's a housing issue, that's a food issue, that's a transportation issue, because it's such a massive part of our budget. So I'm not saying that you have to go and know everything that we're working on. Part of this is me and my office reaching out and being like, hey, this is really important, please plug in on this. But I would say, and I've said this to different climate groups, of you want to do climate work in Minneapolis in 2026, you need to care about the budget. And so having people really getting plugged into, yes, we're working on our thing, we're organizing around our thing, and we need to be conscious of the budget it goes into everything. And so sometimes we'll have to show up to talk about a thing that we don't normally talk about or that we're not experts in, but we know that in terms of priorities, our thing is higher. So that's what I would say. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I absolutely think that you're bringing up a good point, that a lot of times we feel like we have the time for the capacity to engage at a higher level when it comes to housing measures that are up for debate. But I really do hear you that it really matters to make the time and build capacity, at least around the budget conversation. And that has become extremely glaring during this time where we're debating things like, do we support everyone who is impacted by the metro surge, or just some people and let the problem exacerbate over time for everyone? Because that would be the result, is that people are not being cared for in our eviction process, and they're still having to face recovering their rent, etc. So absolutely, that makes a lot of sense. And I look forward to opportunities to engaging further and to engaging more of the housing in action community in this conversation around paying close attention to budget allocations and showing up to demand that the budget reflect our collective value for each other and for each other's safety and for each other being housed and fed and well educated. That is something that we all want. And it's a $2 billion budget. I just want to come back to that. It's $2 billion for 2026. So let's find ways to use it to support the community that is here today.
Okay. Is there anything, AsaleSol, that you would like to promote, tell people to go to, direct people to get more interested in?
Please check us out, Housing in Action. We are at Housing in Action across all social media platforms, and our website is just housinginaction.org. Please investigate those policies. Our future starts with home, Yes to Home Minnesota, and Bring It Home Minnesota. At least know about them and decide for yourself after investigation if you want to support them. And assuming that you will, please get involved. Like you said, John, you can access the web pages for those by simply Googling them. They're very accessible. And stay tuned. We also have a podcast that we promote, and we hope to further the conversation with Councilmember Soren in that space as well. So tune in.
You can't come on my podcast to poach guests for your podcast. That's kind of rude.
I thought this was communal
and my audience too. Are we cross promoting?
Democratic.
We're cross promoting. Okay. Soren, I have to compliment you. You're new in the job, but you're asking really good questions as a council member. And, as somebody who watches meetings, I find if you're asking good questions, then I'm learning from the people who are answering the questions. So my compliments to you. Is there anything you would like to promote?
Well, thanks for saying that. My staff is really good. And so we each come up with our own questions or come up with them together. So kudos to them as well. Anything I'd like to promote? There are so many things happening at the city, and always things that I want people to come out for, to fight for. But the state legislature is only in session so long. So maybe just for this one time, Go and do the things at the state legislature. Yes to homes, all these things. And then, please, for the love of God, get active in this next election so that we don't have a split house anymore, and we elect people who are pro-climate, who are pro-housing, who are pro-comprehensive public safety. That won't always just mean whichever Democrat comes around, but it might just mean whichever Democrat comes around. So please get involved in that. And also, if none of those things are up your alley, just please get involved in your neighborhood. Not your neighborhood association per se, though maybe, but like get to know your neighbors, know the people around you, have some kind of connection with people so that when something comes up, you and a lot of other people, or at least a few other people, are going to know about it and going to feel like, hey, I can do this with somebody else. So just get involved.
Okay, well, thank you, Minneapolis Councilmember Soren Stevenson and AsaleSol Young, Executive Director of Housing and Action. It was nice to meet you here today on the podcast. This has been the Wedge Life Podcast. I'm your host, John Edwards. Thank you for listening.
This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.